to fly around with a buzzing sound. Up off the ground, flies like to fly around.
So this screencast is going to encompass flies, but also beetles, and that's the focus of forensic entomology. So I'd like you to take a look at these objectives. I'll let you read them. And take a look at this vocabulary, and I'll ask you to please pause your video now. And again, please pause your video to read. So the intro case that we'll look at happened in 1997. There was a guy named Kevin Neal who was a stepfather to his wife's children, an 11-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. And in their small town in Ohio, he reported them as missing one afternoon when they were playing in the yard, and he was allegedly cleaning the house and his wife was at work. So their bodies were not recovered until 2 months later by a farmer, and this was after extensive searching from many people in the county. And so what was determined was that Kevin Neal, the stepfather, was the perpetrator in this homicide, and the prosecutors said that he sought to punish his wife because he thought her to be unfaithful. And one of the reasons for his conviction was through the use of forensic entomology. The defense team said that the murder had happened at a time period when Neal was incarcerated for something else, but the prosecution said no, that in fact this happened in the winter time when Neal was not imprisoned, and did not have that alibi. And the reason they were able to assert that it happened in the winter time was because there was an absence of blowflies and screwworms, which are more active in warmer temperatures. And so it was actually the absence of certain arthropods that enabled his conviction. He was convicted of 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of abuse of a corpse, and 2 counts of tampering of evidence for falsely reporting the children as missing. He's currently serving a life sentence without parole. So forensic entomology is the use of arthropods toward forensic investigation. And an arthropod is an invertebrate. It's a phylum. And all arthropods have in common that they have 3 body segments: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Now within the phylum arthropod is also a class of insects, and this would be more of a specific body plan for insects. So the history of forensic entomology really begins in the year 1235 when this Chinese judicial intendant wrote a book called Washing Away of Wrongs, which was about how to determine probable cause of death from a body. And so then there is a progression here in first disproving the idea of abiogenesis, otherwise known as spontaneous generation, that flies came from rotting meat instead of from fly eggs. And then the first use of entomology to estimate postmortem interval, or time since death. And then you can see here sort of a progression toward where we are today. So let's try to get our bearings here with the different types of life forms that are used. We mentioned that Arthropoda is the phylum, so kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So after a phylum would be the orders, and the 2 orders that are of most help here are Diptera and Coleoptera. And so Diptera is basically types of flies, and Coleoptera is the order that contains beetles. Now just to zoom out for a moment more, there are other classes besides insects within Arthropoda, and those classes involve arachnids, like spiders, Myriapoda, which are millipedes and centipedes, and crustaceans like lobster and shrimp, which is kind of fun to know that that really gourmet meal that you had out on New Year's Day was of a lobster, close relative of a blowfly. Relatively close, at least. Anyway, so the classifications of arachnid, myriapoda, and crustaceans are not as relevant here. We're focusing in on class Insecta, and then specifically the two orders, Diptera, the flies, and Coleoptera, the beetles. In order to understand postmortem interval based on insect growth, one of the most important things is the life cycle of the insect. So you start with the egg, which matures into larva, and as you go through this, think about a butterfly. So it starts as an egg, and then the larval form for a butterfly is a caterpillar. The pupa would be a casing, and the pupa form of a butterfly would be a cocoon, and then the adult hatches, whether it's an adult fly or the butterfly. Now you can separate the larval stage here into first instar, second instar, and third instar based on their growth and development. And as you see here, it takes approximately 14 to 16 days from egg to adult, depending on the temperatures and humidity levels at the location of the body for a fly. So that brings in a couple of variables that are really important: humidity levels, location, weather patterns, etc. So one of the goals is to evaluate postmortem interval, time elapsed since the person died. Forensic entomology is most relevant when it comes to death investigation that the body is discovered 72 hours or after the person passed. Within 48 hours, however, there is still insect activity, as the female blowfly, the blowfly is one of the first insects to arrive on the body, will lay eggs in moist areas. I've read that it's within 10 minutes that a person dies, that there are chemicals emitted that the blowfly can pick up on, and those females will come to lay their eggs, usually in the orifices of the body, the nose, the mouth, the eyes, or if there has been some sort of injury like a gunshot wound, then that would be a place where they would lay their eggs. And so that's a way that you can actually infer physical trauma, is by that growth in areas that aren't natural orifices. So in order to collect and preserve the evidence, first you got to take note of all the things going on around. Weather patterns including precipitation, wind, humidity, temperature, light exposure, and this is during the postmortem interval. And you need to obviously avoid disturbing anything on or around the body, measuring the distance of the body to insects, and collecting samples of all insect stages. So these are a couple of steps to take when collecting and preserving the evidence, and I would like you to read these, and I would invite you to please pause your video now. Okay, and this is a continued list of collecting and preserving, so I want you to read these 3 steps and go ahead and pause your video now, please. This would be a typical data form that would be used to include the forensic entomology evidence. Notice that there's general information about the death scene area, whether it was in an urban, aquatic, suburban sort of environment, or rural. Also exposure. So this is the kind of thing we were talking about, where if there's wind, if there's lighting, then all those things can affect insect growth as well as decomposition. The stage of decomposition, whether fresh, bloated, active decay, advanced decay, skeletonization, saponification, mummification, and dismemberment. And then as you get further down, you see evidence of scavengers, possible traumatic injury sites, and so forth. Notice scene temperatures, ambient, body surface, ground surface, maggot mass, and so forth. So we mentioned a few things that will affect the insect growth. The natural environment, natural light, natural environment, artificial light, artificial environment, natural light, artificial environment, artificial light. So there are any of these combinations that can affect the stages of growth. And those things that need to be recorded would be ambient air temperature 1 foot above the body and 4 feet above the body. Ground soil would include the soil surface 10 centimeters below and 20 centimeters below, as this would affect some of the insect activity around. Alright, and then the steps in collecting and preserving may include capturing the live flies with nets, pinning the flies, preserving with an 80-20 alcohol to water solution, and this could include adult flies, eggs, or the largest larvae. And then the vials would need to be labeled in typical evidence fashion with case number, collection time, date, geographic location, and location of insects on the victim, and the initials of the investigator. Alright, so take a look at the summary of the things that we covered here today, and thanks for tuning in. Feel free to pause your video whenever, or just allow it to play through.
All day long. Let's think about the spiders one more time, because I've been seeing a lot of spiders in my house lately. Spiders like to crawl and climb all the time. It's just fine. Spiders like to crawl and climb all day long. That's a song about some of the bugs that I see around springtime.